Hey y'all! In this video, we're going to take a step way back into the basics and discuss open vectors versus closed vectors and how you can do a form of V-carving with open vectors. Now, easily, the one thing I get requested of me the most is help with a file where the person is trying to close vectors and it's just a jumbled mess of open vectors. In most instances, those vectors don't need to be closed, depending upon what the person is trying to do. Before we even get into that, let me just state that over here in the Toolpaths tab, if you're using a VCarve toolpath, a pocket toolpath, a drilling toolpath, you will need closed vectors. But having said that, you don't necessarily need closed vectors to carve with a V-bit. You can use a profile toolpath or a quick engraving toolpath. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the quick engraving toolpath in this video. I'm going to concentrate on the profile toolpath. So let's go back over here and import some vectors, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. There is a type of art that's gained popularity over the last couple of years, and that is patent illustration art and blueprint art. Now, forewarned is forearmed. It is very difficult, just by the very nature of the fact that it's a patent illustration, to find patent art and blueprint art that's in the public domain and that's available for commercial use. It's difficult, but it's not necessarily impossible. Just be warned that just because something is old doesn't necessarily mean that it's in the public domain. Be careful. Some of these patents are still in effect, and the illustrations are copywritten or trademarked. But for this demonstration, I'm going to use a piece of blueprint styled art that is in the public domain from freesvg.org. And I'll put a link to this particular drawing down the description box of this video. Now, I've already downloaded this piece of artwork, and we're going to go ahead and import it. And I'm going to show you how I would carve this particular design. So the first thing we'll do is I'll go up here to my File menu, Import Vectors, and navigate to the correct folder, and there is my picture. A word of caution about SVG files. SVG files are not necessarily vectors. Sometimes they are just a bitmap image. In this particular case, I have already checked this out, and this is a vector drawing. Just know that some SVG files are not vectors. It is a bitmap, and you will have to do a bitmap trace. But for now, let's go ahead and import this particular drawing, and there we go. We'll go ahead and we'll drag it up here and close to the middle of the material. And when I click off, you notice it disappeared. Well, it hasn't really disappeared. If you zoom in real close, you can kind of see it. This is something to watch out for. Let me go ahead and select it all so that we've got it highlighted in pink. Just know that a lot of blueprints, the vectors, are drawn in white, which is why we couldn't see anything. So I'll come up here to my layer manager, and we see when I imported the vectors, it imported them on this layer, and the layer color is white. Now if I click this icon right here, it opens up the color menu. I can now select black. Then when I click off, I can now see the vectors. with that done, I'm going to go ahead and select all of these vectors, and I want to center it on my material. So let's go ahead and select them all, align them, then I'll go ahead and close that window. Now, if we look at this artwork, we'll see that this space up here between the top of this rectangle and the top of this rectangle is narrower than this space down here. I'm going to leave it this way because I'm going to enter some text down here. We also get in here and start clicking around, and we see that this drawing has a lot of open vectors. So let me back out a little bit, right-click, go up to Selection, select all open vectors. And oh boy, we have a bunch of them. So if we were going to VCarve this design, we would have a lot of work ahead of us. Well, we're not going to VCarve this design. What we're going to do is we're going to engrave this design. And there is a subtle but profound difference between VCarving and engraving. Remember, VCarving carves inside the vectors. It carves in between the vectors here. And in this case, you do need a closed vector. So these lights here would VCarve. The little light and license plate mount on the trunk would VCarve. This sculpture line here would not. And this is where a lot of people have problems. They want to be able to close this vector up so that they can VCarve this. And it's just simply not going to happen. You would have to create more layers and close this vector with maybe this outside rim here, and you'll have a duplicate vector here. It's just a pain. I prefer for this style not to even attempt to VCarve. I'll just engrave the outline. Before I get into that, however, the artist who drew this drew it the way a blueprint would be drawn, in that there are some overlapping vectors here. For instance, we have the windshield frame. There's the bottom of the windshield. Here's the top of the windshield. And you can see the outline of the cockpit through the windshield. Well, that just isn't real life. That wouldn't happen. You wouldn't be able to see this outline. So I'm going to clean up some of these vectors. So we'll start out up here. We'll come in and we'll get rid of that vector there and here. I also wouldn't be able to see the outline of the cockpit through this roll bar. So we'll get rid of that right there. Now I've just created more open vectors. That's okay. Now I'm not sure if this is a mirror or a tachometer, but I do know you wouldn't be able to see this side of it through the windshield frame. So I'll trim that away. And I'll also trim away the outline of the dash here. You wouldn't see that through the windshield frame, nor would you see this portion of this hood contour line right there. So we'll get rid of that. Also, you wouldn't see the bottom outline of the nose cone through this bumperette here, so we'll get rid of that. And it's the same here in back. You wouldn't see this sculpture line through the bumperette there. And there are other little things I could do. You wouldn't see that end of the exhaust pipe through the opening. Let's take a look at that. That looks a little better. You wouldn't see the bottom of the headlight rim behind the bumperette. And this rock guard here, you wouldn't see that through the fender flare. I think we can work with that, so let's go ahead and close. Now I've created even more open vectors. And if I were going to try to VCarve this, it would be even more of a nightmare. So that's not what I'm going to do. Instead, I'm going to go ahead and group these vectors. Then we'll do a profile toolpath. So the first thing I'll do is I'll draw my box from left to right. around all of the carve vectors. When I release, only those that were inside that box are selected, and I'll group them. Then we'll go over here and we'll calculate a profile toolpath. So I'll select those vectors, and I'm going to come over here to my profile toolpath. And one of the differences between using a profile to engrave and using a VCarve toolpath is we'll need to select the depth, because all of these vectors are going to be carved at the same depth. Now, I'm going to use a fairly small bit on this with a very sharp point, so I don't need it to go very deep. In fact, I'm only going to carve this 50 thousandths, so not quite a 1/16 of an inch deep. So we'll go 0.05, and I'm going to select a 30-degree V-bit. Select that. And here's the important part. I want to make sure to machine on the vector. I'm not going to do anything else down here, but call it, let's get rid of the number, and we'll call this the car profile. We'll calculate that toolpath. I'm going to make my toolpath color black so you can see it. And I've chosen a white maple background here. And we'll preview this toolpath. And we have an engraving of this cobra that looks pretty decent. Because I'm using such a small bit, if I decide I want these lines to be a bit bolder, all I need to do is choose to cut a little bit deeper. Again, I'm only cutting 50 thousandths deep. Let's reset the preview, recalculate that. Let's see what happens if we go cut a full 1/16 of an inch deep. We'll calculate, then we'll preview, and a 1/16 of an inch does work okay. We have some areas here where it looks like I think it might be cutting too deep. We're getting a pretty thick area here where these lines meet, and it's hard to tell what they are. So I think I'm going to go back to 50 thou and leave it there. Calculate, back out to a straight Z view, preview selected toolpaths, and now it's not quite the mess it was. It's still just a little bit closer together than I would like. But without doing a lot of modifications, I think that'll do. The other thing to remember is the scale of the project. This is not super big. Okay, so let's go ahead and close this. I'm going to go back over here to my 2D view. And normally I would not have calculated these toolpaths until I had everything ready to go. But that was to demonstrate to you that you can carve with a V-bit on open vectors. You do not have to have closed vectors. Again, this is engraving the outlines. This is not attempting to V-carve to a varying depth. It doesn't work in every situation. Some situations you will have to go in and close vectors. Let's see what we have here. We have this rectangle out here, that's fine. It's kind of frames the drawing, and I think I like that, so I think I'll carve that as well. Out here, however, we've got this square, which has, well, they both have round corners. I think what I'll do on this particular rectangle, however, is I'm going to open it up a little bit further down here to give me a little bit more space. I will center it in my material. And I'm going to put some text down here in the center. So we'll zoom in down here, go up here into my text, and I'm just going to write Cobra. Close that. Click it again to go into Move and Transform mode and bring it down here. And I'll center that on my drawing. But I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to grab that center, and I'm going to make that text just a little bit smaller, a little bit shorter. Let's kind of squish it down some so that it sits right about there. That I like. So now, for this text, I do want a VCarve. So I'll come back over into my Toolpaths tab, select a VCarve toolpath, the text. Yeah, I'll go ahead and carve it to a flat depth with my 90-degree V-bit, which is my go-to bit for most V-carving. I'm going to use a 1/8 inch end mill as a clearance tool. I'll change that name to VCarve. Oops, I forgot I had caps lock on. VCarve text. Calculate that toolpath. Okay, it's telling me here, the following tools produced empty toolpaths. The text is too small for the 1/8 inch end mill. Okay, that's fine. So basically what that's telling me is this 1/8 inch clear, it's not going to do anything. If I uncheck that, I have this checked, it's an empty toolpath. It's not going to do anything. Let me go ahead and preview to show you nothing happens. So what do I do in this case? Very simple. Right-click, delete this. Just delete that clearance toolpath. Now if I go in here and recalculate, you'll see Use Clearance Tools is gone. We'll go back into the preview window. I'll set my toolpath color to black, and we'll preview that toolpath. Okay, looks nice. Now we'll come out here, close this preview window, select these two vectors, and I just want these to be little pinstripes. But if I'm not careful, if I carve too deep, I run the risk of that V-bit carving so wide it cuts into the engraving here, or it cuts into my lettering here or down here. So I need to be careful about that. So again, I'm going to go ahead and use a profile toolpath. I am going to go ahead and cut 625 deep. I will use the 30-degree V-bit. I just want it a little bit bolder. Again, I'll machine on the vector. And we'll come down here and we'll call that Profile 3. That's good. Calculate. And I'll change to black again. And we'll preview that toolpath. So we now have our lines, our sculpture lines out here, our little pinstripes. We have our text down here. And we have what I think looks like a fairly decent piece of art. I'd hang that on my wall. You begin to see the difference in using a profile toolpath with a V-bit to carve on the vector rather than attempting to close a bunch of vectors and V-carve it. Again, this is not really a candidate for V-carving. You could V-carve some of the details. You could V-carve the tires. You could V-carve the windshield frame. You could V-carve the roll bar. But for this type of artwork, just carving on the open vector, just my opinion, looks far better than V-carving certain pieces of the picture and carving the outline of other pieces of the picture. So my broader point in all of this is that you don't have to have a closed vector to be able to carve that vector. If you are going to V-carve, pocket, or drill, you certainly need closed vectors. If you're not doing one of those three, they can be done with the Profile Toolpath or the Quick Engrave Toolpath. Just because I brought it up, let me go ahead and demonstrate the Quick Engrave Toolpath. We'll reset our preview. We'll go over into the 2D view, close the preview window, and I want to just select the vectors of the car. We'll go over here to our Quick Engrave Toolpath. The main difference between the Quick Engrave Toolpath and carving the way I did with the Profile Toolpath is semantics, really. The depth and pressure, the depth is the same. That's the cutting depth. I've got this one set to 0.05, the same as I had the Profile Toolpath. You have a choice of outline or a fill. A fill like straight horizontal lines or hatching, cross-hatching. Personally, I just prefer an outline. We're not using a nose cone that is specialized for specific engraving equipment, and I would call it Quick Engrave Car. Calculate that toolpath, and you'll see it does create a toolpath. There's all of our start points, but it doesn't automatically jump over into the preview window. Usually, an engraving toolpath, there's not much to preview. You may see some scratches, but that's about it. But because I'm using a V-bit for this and I'm cutting 50 thou deep, there is something to preview. You'll also notice that I can go ahead and save the toolpath from here without previewing it. Personally, I don't like to do that. I'll just close it, go into my preview window, select the Quick Engrave Toolpath, select the color, and preview that toolpath. Looks identical to the Profile Toolpath that we used earlier because basically it is identical. This is a case, as I said before, of semantics. You can use either the Quick Engrave with a V-bit, or you can use a Profile Toolpath with the V-bit. The only thing to remember with the Profile Toolpath is to cut on the vector. The Quick Engrave Toolpath doesn't give you a choice. It automatically cuts on the vector. I would then V-carve my text, then cut these two profiles to give me my frame, and there's our final piece of blueprint art. So, I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. And if you'd like to follow along with my further CNC adventures, I do hope you'll subscribe to my channel. Now don't forget, today at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, I'll be hosting a live Q&A session where we'll get a little bit further into when you need to use open vectors, when you need to use closed vectors, or anything else that I've covered in this video. Again, that's 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, today, right here on my YouTube channel. And I'll put a link to that live Q&A session down in the description to this video. So, I hope to see you this afternoon. And as always, whether you subscribe to my channel or not, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to watch, and y'all take care.